before you. Choose wisely. Bringing it to you live once again from the greatest state in the Union, the Tar Heel State, where the topography is pristine, serene, and verdant green. As I'm your host, Seven Smalls, aka the agitator for male empowerment, where every day is Father's Day, and where manhood is a journey, not a destination. Where manhood is a series of hills and valleys, victories and failures. And whereas men, we don't agree on all things, but we come together as allies of a common cause, only to dissipate when the crisis is over. Now listen, on today we're going to have what I call the Duke of the Manosphere, and the Duke for empowering men of all ethnicities, especially black men, as we live in this sometimes cesspool called America, called L.A.R. movement. L.A.R. movement is what I call the Duke of the Manosphere, because he's been doing a great job empowering men and more or less thinking about the importance of relationships and also how to better themselves. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of the non-custodial father and how the non-custodial father a lot of times is left in the dark, and sometimes how the non-custodial father often suffers in silence. Let's use this time to explore and collaborate on the intricacies of the non-custodial father and how he learned from his lessons and what men can learn from before they allow themselves to go into a state of ill repair. So sit back, relax, and I want you to enjoy this class as I'm your host, Seven Small. And remember this, if it ain't seven, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. I want you to enjoy this show, and I want you to check out Brother L.A.R. Movement on his YouTube channel, and we're going to have a very poignant discussion. Enjoy. All right, L.A.R. Movement still moving. How you doing, brother?
I'm great. How you feeling?
Man, I'm great, man. I call you the Duke of the Manosphere, man. And so, you know, I've been following you for years, LA. You know, you've done a great job as being one of the pioneers, or one of the forerunners for male empowerment. And I want you to tell the audience who Joe Allen is, and why are you so passionate about the rights of men in America, and why you wrote the book about the non-custodial father.
Well, I was a kid born in New Orleans, moved to the DMV, moved to Chicago, moved back to New Orleans, moved back to Chicago. And that was because, you know, my parents got married and they got divorced. So,
right.
You know, I moved whenever my mom moved, basically. Didn't think about it much. A lot of schools early on, but I kind of settled in after a while. And then years later, you know, go to college, graduate, have a kid some years later, and wind up getting into a custody battle.
Okay.
And the whole situation for me just wasn't right ethically.
Right.
But get to court, and I'm somewhat of a realist. So I even told the lawyer I could see how things were going. And I was like, I understand this process is this and that. So ultimately I wound up losing the case. But it was so egregious that I knew that the judge was probably going to keep that in her memory banks to not let other mothers do it, because the judge wound up getting stabbed in the back by the end of the whole process.
Right.
So then I learned from my mistakes in that process, and I had a friend of mine. I had two actually, who one was actually about to fight for custody, and one was it was kind of in the fringe. He didn't know yet. And I started telling them the mistakes that I made and what they could do and what they couldn't do. And subsequently, both of them got their sons.
Right.
So at that point, I was like, you know what? And then I started talking to a lot of brothers who went through this whole system, including my father, and figuring out like how would we handling it and parenting during this whole process, and how was it affecting us, our relationships, and our children. And what I decided to do was write a book.
Okay.
Because the lessons are really not just me. The lessons are numerous men.
Right.
And
Right.
I just retrofitted for the time.
Right.
And come to find out, I because I didn't think that, I think we're very informative. So I didn't write it like a book. You know how the book is like this big or whatever.
Right. Right.
So I was in Walmart, and I'm in Texas. So, they got Texas football. They got them big pamphlets. So I wrote it like that. So I wrote it in sections so you could skip from one to the other or read it all the way through if you need a particular thing.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I got a good response from it because guys actually could use some of the stuff.
Right.
You could go from the court to not dealing with the court to just the raising part to the relationship part. So I'm probably going to do another one because ironically, I'm going to have custody this year from now on.
Okay, good.
So part of the things that I was doing in that book are part of the reason why I'm out of custody in the first place. So that's it.
Well, the good thing is, you set the template for trying to inspire and ensure that men get the basic rights that they need. And, we're going to look at things through a clinical lens, but also from an anecdotal lens of LA. And I want to ask you a couple of questions because I think it's pertinent that we address these questions because there are a lot of young men that are going through the same things that you went through. And the lessons of a non-custodial father needs to be more or less exemplified so that others won't suffer in silence. I'm going to ask you this poignant question. Are men treated fairly in this country? And if not, tell me why. Why are men not treated fairly in this country?
My answer will be depending on what men you're talking about and what's the situation.
Right.
Overall, I think we're treated fairly in the things that suit us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're treated unfairly in the things that suit other people.
Okay.
So I think we've accepted the adversity of not being treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't hinder us as much unless it's a situation where it's numerous adversities at one particular time.
Right.
So in ways we are treated unfairly. It's just, as a man, you kind of built to handle it. But that's if you're in mentally the right space.
Right. And it sounds like to me you went through a tumultuous time when you were going through some of the various nuances of trying to understand not only the paternity courts, but not paternity courts, the family courts. And, it's very telling that you wrote a book called Lessons of a Non-Custodial Father. I want to ask you another question. What did you remember about your past in the community growing up in New Orleans and Chicago that you felt like kept you sane and kept you from doing things that you would have regretted later because you felt like you weren't treated fairly?
Ironically, the moving actually helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think people realize this. There's a duality to a person who's always on the move.
Right.
One is you might not be able to maintain relationships because you're on the move. That's the negative.
Mm-hmm.
The positive is you'll see a bunch of different lifestyles and lives that you wouldn't see just in one place.
Right.
So New Orleans taught me about hard work and a side hustle or being artistic. Because New Orleans is a city where you work a 9 to 5, but from 5 to 9, you might actually be out, being a musician or something.
Right.
And those are two different lifestyles, but the same person could do them.
Right.
Chicago, well, the DMV actually taught me how unfair America was. Because I was there in the 80s, and that was when, you know, the projects was behind the White House. And one of my first American lessons was to have poverty in America and to see that you print money on one street and people are poor a mile and a half, 2 miles over. So that taught me a lesson of America in general. And Chicago taught me, you know, there will be consequences to your actions if you, you know, whether it be positive or negative, and people do not, they won't have sympathy or mercy for you.
Right. So yeah, go ahead, bro.
No, that was it.
So it sounds like to me you grew up in a caustic environment, and that caustic environment prepared you to deal with the stresses of being a non-custodial father. The challenges of growing up in New Orleans have more or less taught you to deal with some of the things that you went through as a man. You know, you and I had a prior discussion. You and I both are fire signs. You know, I'm a Leo, you know, king of the jungle. Get your L's up, but but you're a Sagittarius, so you got that sag swag. And Sagittarians are very expressive, and they're very opinionated. How did you contain that fire, LA, when you were in the courts? How did you contain that fire? How did you keep your composure? Because I know it was very stressful and telling for you as a passionate person like yourself. How did you keep your composure when you went through the things that you went through?
I actually accepted it before I walked into court. I actually accepted that this wasn't going to be fair.
Right.
At any particular moment, any type of way that I could act as a black male in particular could make it go left.
Right.
So I had to be more stoic and angelic than the norm.
Right.
But I had to be honest, you know, and I think the honesty kind of, it actually helped me in the case.
Right.
But I didn't think when I say the honesty helped me, I didn't realize how much until after they had the ruling, how much the judge was like, she kind of gave a ruling saying, if you mess up, he getting his kid. Because I don't think people understand, like, and I said it in the book, family court is not court in your mind like judge, jury. Judge is the jury. It's all subjective. And even the rules that even if you fit the criteria and hit all the bullet points of things being in your favor as a better parent, that doesn't mean that the judge won't rule against you.
Right.
So when I accepted that before I went into it, it made the experience a whole lot easier for me.
Right.
Because I'll tell you why. My very first experience in the court, prior to the custody thing, I had custody and I filed for custody. So I walk into a court, and there's a black woman who was the judge in this particular court. She got the paper, she looked at it, she started going in on me. And I just sat there. And I waited. Because she was so accustomed to women filing child support on men and for custody.
Right.
That she just saw man name, woman name, and then she went on a guy. And then she stopped and she looked and she realized that the names were in reverse. And then she was like, okay, let's start over. So from that point, I was like, okay, this is going to be an uphill battle because just by the norm of how the courts go, they're ready to go in on you as a dad. Right. So that's why I was the way I was actually.
Right. You know, you went through a transformative process that could have went left or could have went right. And, you know, you kept your motivation, you kept your head up, and you kept your poise and your patience. You know, you got a book on Amazon. Please check out L.A.R. Movement, Brother Joe Allen book on Amazon called Lessons of a Non-Custodial Father. You can get it on Amazon for, I believe, $12.99, right?
Yeah.
And so please check out L.A.R. Movement, which I call, once again, the Duke of the manosphere, but the Duke of Male Empowerment, because he's been on this journey for many years, and I followed this brother for a long period of time. But this situation, brother L.A., could have went left or right. How did faith keep you grounded? Did family keep you grounded? Because you know, and I know that men often suffer in silence when they're going through something perilous, like either paternity fraud, when I had brother Carnell Smith, when I had brother Al Grease, when he was talking about frustrated too, as it relates to paternity court. But your situation is very different. It's talking about the non-custodial parent. So we're going to talk about coping strategies as we get deep into this session, but I know mentally you went through a state of probably where you felt like you were breaking. So I want you to reiterate that a little bit more and talk about it more in depth.
I actually went through the 5 stages of grief.
Right. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, I got that written down.
And I talked about it in the book where, you know, and part of it was, it's weird because as a man, it happens a lot to men, but you feel like you're alone because normally if you talk about it with other men, it's like, dude, I'm not, you know, that's what happens. Like, it's kind of like when you're going through it, it's like, hey man, you got to get over that because it happens to all of us. And you don't really, you have to flush out your emotions. You know, you got to get yourself through the anger. You got to get yourself through the guilt. You got to get yourself through the arguing. You have to get yourself all the way to acceptance.
Right.
And in some ways that can make you very cold.
It can, right.
So, and people don't realize, like, and once you get to the acceptance, if you become cold, you have to actually get yourself out of cold to do something to bring life back into yourself. Because some people, you know, a lot of people go take the idea that guys just walk away without taking into consideration he might have accepted the fate of the situation so much that he's done.
Right.
And people don't, that doesn't register because it's not happening to you. You know, some people are done and some people keep, you know, trying, and you don't know when a person's limit is.
Right.
So that's, for me, depression was one of the things I really had to think about.
Yes, sir. Right.
And to me, you know, when you talk about the coping things, if you don't have ways to get yourself out of that depression, it might go bad. Right.
And when you say go bad, I agree with you 100%. And it could and can go bad because, you know, a lot of times men, we internalize our pain. We don't talk about it. We internalize it. Michael Basin years ago wrote a book called Men Cry in the Dark. And a lot of times it's those dark moments, brother L.A. I've always said in the past that a broken man is a hopeless man. And a hopeless man is a dangerous man. And so when men go through what we call in the clinical world a catharsis, that, you know, where they, you know, or where they're not allowed to let out that negativity or that toxicity, they turn it back within. And sometimes it's manifest in drugs, it's manifest in rampant sex, it's manifest in suicide, it's manifest in domestic violence, it's manifest in murder, it's manifest in a myriad of negative things because they don't have the positive coping skills or more or less the ecosystem or the infrastructure to help them deal with that pain. And so, you know, I'm honored to have you on this platform and also on this show, because as a clinical therapist, I don't want men to go through that pain when they don't have a way to let out that catharsis, to let out that negative toxicity. And so I'm glad you came on the show because your book can be a safekeeper. And also shout out to brother Carnell Smith, the paternity coach, Trapped by Law. His book also can be a reference point to help men overcome the things that they have been through in this caustic American court system. Are American men not equipped, brother L.A.R. movement, to deal with the shenanigans of the modern relationships? You talk a lot about relationships. You talk a lot about what I call the thoroughfare that we see with some of our women, you know, black and white or whatever. Are American men equipped to deal with modern relationships? And so I'm Gen X. I don't know. You might be a millennial.
I'm Gen X.
Oh, you look. You look.
I'm
good.
at the end. I'm at the end.
Oh, you're at the end. All right. But so Are they equipped to deal with relationships and sometimes the residual trauma that's more or less impacting them in a negative way?
I think we're equipped to deal with relationships, but I think the shift of thinking how the modern day woman is different from the woman that we were kind of raised to date.
Right.
So I think, we're equipped for the traditional thing, but we're working out the modern thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of us guys are like, listen, man, I don't want that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are like, okay, I work with this, but I work with that. We're equipped for the traditional thing, but we're working out the modern thing. Mm-hmm. And I think some of us guys are like, listen, man, I don't want that at all. I'll just wait it. At the end of the day, I think our adjustment is going to change our interactions with women. And I think that's what's been happening over the last few years. Mm-hmm. In a quote unquote manosphere space, is just giving a new perspective to, obviously we need a new deal.
Right.
And I think some of the ladies are like half in and half out, where they know why we're saying we need a new deal. Mm-hmm. They get that the relationships won't be the same if we don't. So it's to me, we're like on the precipice of either peace or chaos. So it just depends on our decisions and choices.
Right. Did you feel like the relationship that you had with the woman that you had your child with, what did you know then versus what do you know now versus then? I mean, what did you know about female psychology then versus now?
Okay, well, how can I say? I met her. We actually met as teenagers. Mm-hmm. So I've known her since I was 14.
Right.
So basically what ended up happening is we grew up and grew apart in senses in a way, mm-hmm. and it became adults and then hooked back up. Mm-hmm. And with that situation, come to find out, because she sent me a long message recently, actually apologizing. Mm-hmm. I was ahead of her as far as plan and thought out future. Mm-hmm. So basically, I think she was on a feminist man-hater thing at a particular point. She rolled that out, mm-hmm. and then it didn't lead to the road that she thought. It didn't lead to the end that she thought it would.
Right.
So, but I had long checked out by then.
Right.
And I think what it is, how can I put this nicely? I think what I learned was something I learned in Chicago. Sometimes you just got to let people go.
Right. I agree.
And I think what she learned was, don't let an ideology ruin your relationships.
Right.
So now we're kind of at that space, because when she talks to me now, she can hear some of the things I was saying back then.
Right.
But we both have grown and I guess become better at communicating also.
Right. And if you think about, and I want to be careful how I say this, because but when you think about some of the mandates of feminism, we've always said that if feminism means a woman get fair pay for fair work, I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. But you said some of the ideologies that she had impacted her relationship. Tell me about that tug of war that you had. Be a little bit more specific. The tug of war that you had, did she respect you or reverence you as her man, or was she jousting for power in the relationship?
It was a few things. It was she was jostling for power. She was jostling for the man role. Mm-hmm. She also was from a town that wasn't as aggressive as the cities that I grew up in.
Right.
But she wanted that same feel. And she didn't know that side of me because I wouldn't It is not, to me. It's not necessary to show people that
Right.
you're overly aggressive. But I think me not doing that, she thought I was quote unquote would be considered as weak or whatever.
Right.
And I would kind of chuckle because I'm like, I don't take you seriously because of where you're from in the first place. and you know, plus the how can I say, it wasn't her, but it was like a family, a matriarchal, or people talk about the gynocracy. It was that family setup, because that, you know, we're gonna get these men, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna play this game, we're gonna run these guys. And I think there came a point where, because I remember telling her at one point, I said, listen, man, if you keep playing like this and you keep picking a fight, we're gonna really get into it. And I'm gonna treat you like a man because you're crossing the line. And I think for me, for her, it was kind of like shocking. And for me, it was like she kind of knew I was dead serious.
Right.
Because it wasn't about the beef between me and her. Because a lot of people don't realize when two parents go at it, the beef between them two, it's not just that the child is involved. It's that you'll sabotage the parenting.
Right.
And if you sabotage the parenting, you ultimately sabotage the child.
Right. I totally agree.
Which creates a new beef.
Right. And, you know, that's, you know, the ongoing struggle that we see a lot of time in family systems, where, you know, there's a lot of triangulation, that we use that term in the clinical world. But I got another question for you. You know, when you think about lessons of the non-custodial father, what were more or less lessons from your own biological father? How did your dad and the men in your community help you deal with this crisis that you were going through? And what I call the manhood chronicles, because it definitely was a chronicle in manhood where you're telling your story now. But how did your dad and also your other brothers in your community help you deal with this struggle that you had?
They gave me direction. Because my dad at times had a drug problem. And I didn't realize until I got older, that's kind of part of the depression. The other, you know, my uncles, they went through it too. Well, my uncle, he went through it too. We both actually. And they handled it differently. One like would work a lot, and another would, he went to the artistic realm, like when he was off. And then I had friends who would just kind of rip and run the streets to not think about it. And what I come to find out is, you know, as I got older, I started realizing the reasons why. So I started trying to eliminate that reason for myself so I don't go down the negative paths.
Right.
And the positive thing was I could absolutely say that they taught me how to parent and live and love in the moment.
Right.
Because people don't realize if you got a short amount of time, it's shorter than you think. So
yes, sir. Right.
For the summer, it's kind of like getting the way it. I hate to say this. It's kind of like getting an abused dog. You got to get them to trust you before you can even get you know, build a rapport with them.
Right.
So if you're there for the summer, the first month might be trust month. Then you might be able to, you know, get in the groove and have loving interactions. And then by the time you actually, you know, on the same page, the kid's gone. And, you know, it starts over and over and over again. So that's what I learned from them, because they put me up on that at first.
Right. You know, Brother L.A., as a clinical therapist, we call the final stages of the treatment process the recovery. But before you can go do a recovery, you must go to what I call an uncovering. And so what did you uncover? And you maybe talked about it earlier, but what did you uncover about yourself, your level of resilience, and also how did you finagle that uncovering when you was going through your catharsis? I know it's a loaded question, but what did you uncover about yourself, as you was going through as you were trying to recover, and also how were you, how did you deal with the catharsis when you went through it?
Well, something I uncovered is what I already knew. I do have an anger problem, but these situations will make it worse. So what I learned was to, I've always had hobbies since I was a kid. I played like 4 different sports when I was young.
Oh, wow.
So I wind up knowing from the sports that you can channel your anger, or you can channel all of your emotions from a negative to a positive.
Right.
And I uncovered that I'm pretty good at that. But I have to have a focus.
Right.
And the other thing I uncovered was, how can I say this? When you're young, being a realist, I accepted that I wasn't a good parent. And what I mean by that is you have a vision for the type of parent you are, but you got to work to be that parent in practical application.
Right.
So I uncovered that I actually like the challenge of being the parent that I envision myself to be.
Right.
So that work, I uncovered that I wanted to do that. I really wanted to, and not necessarily for me, but more so because if you view yourself as a certain type of person and you're a certain type of parent, it can either propel your child to do good things, or it could sabotage them to do bad things.
No doubt.
So I was like, if I see if this is my goal of being a parent, I have to do certain things to be this person so I can give this knowledge this way.
Right.
So I uncovered that I really love the challenge of that. I really do. So now, and I will say I uncovered that I really have a good sense of humor.
Right. Well, actually, humor is very important in dealing with pain. That's what we would call more or less a healthy coping mechanism. And so I would say kudos to you. What is the non-custodial parent, and how is it negative to the Black community? Before you start, to the audience out there, get the likes up. Go check out brother L.A.R. Movement on his YouTube channel called L.A.R. Movement. Go check out his YouTube channel. And please like, share, and subscribe. And also go check out my channel, The Kosher Clinician, on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe as we work together as allies of a common cause to help empower Black men so that we can empower Black families and Black communities, and more or less love our women and protect them. But once again, what is the non-custodial parent, and how is it negative to the Black community? Let's talk about that, brother L.A.
The non-custodial parent is the parent that doesn't have custody, doesn't have primary custody. So you're the parent that has secondary custody. You're the weekends and the holidays and the summers and spring break and, Christmas break. You're that parent. How it affects the community is it affects the effectiveness of protecting and even providing for your children. Because most people in that type of situation are not on the same page.
Right.
And when you're not on the same page, I could give you an example. That's something that I would teach my son certain things. And my son's mother, when she would see that I taught him certain things, she actually liked it. But she would unteach those things and then reteach those things. And so she could say she taught him. So after a while, people don't realize when you keep breaking a child down and building them up to a certain place,
right,
then the kid starts doing that to themselves. So they can get to a certain place, and the child will start doing the very thing. You teach them something, then they break it apart and blow it up, and then they go try to teach themselves something else and say, I did it. And then they live in all the mistakes of it. So it creates an environment where children make unnecessary mistakes because the parents are at odds. and that doesn't help our community whatsoever. That's why you get a lot of adults who are late bloomers or in arrested development.
Right. You know, you overcame the ravages of being a non-custodial parent. Did you have other men that experienced this more or less negative part of the negative chronicle in their life? And how did the men that you dealt with struggle with losing custody of their children?
It always started bad. Like people act like fathers and men don't have feelings. Mm-hmm. We don't have a heart. The minute you lose your kid, you're gonna go into a depression.
Right.
You know, and a lot of, I want to say, like the first chapter, I talked about a nation of alienation. That mm-hmm. parental alienation part,
right?
It could really break a person in ways that they may not ever be fixed. Mm-hmm. And people don't. And a lot of vices come with that because you got to numb yourself,
right?
Or you just don't want to feel it, and people don't. And I've seen where women have been in that situation, and then like whether you're normally, if you're the new wife or girlfriend and you might have kids, because it's a lot of blended quote unquote families that are not married, basically.
Right.
When women start seeing it from another perspective, it's like, this is what we doing, you know. And then I've seen mothers who the fathers got, because I've seen it rarely though, and the father just put the mother through the ringer, and now she sees how bad this situation can be. And there is no, the guys always taught me that, you know, I'm gonna try to say this properly, and I hate to say this. I don't think people realize alienating these fathers from their children is part of the reason people separate from the church, because you kind of lose faith.
Yes, I like that. Right.
You know.
Right.
And it's fundamentally it's just not right, and it kind of makes you just question, you know, life and God itself. You know. God,
right.
It's I've seen a lot of guys who just like, you know, this ain't life.
Right.
You know, it's the modern day way that you broke up families in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't look at it that way.
Right.
You know, you're trying to pay to get your kid back.
Right. Which is taking the father out, which diminishes the ability of the young man or young boy to more or less look up to an icon that can teach him the rights of being a man. You know, that was one of the privileges that the boys had, even in some of the more, what I call more, I'm going to say archaic civilizations. They had the rights of manhood or the rites of passage, where their fathers taught them how to become men. They had power in their purpose, and their purpose was able to help them overcome some of the challenges of pain and disappointment. But unfortunately, Brother L.A.R., a lot of young boys now don't have purpose because they don't have the facilitators to help them deal with that pain. They did a study, Brother L.A., years ago about some wild elephants. And in that study, when the juvenile elephants didn't have the older bulls, those juvenile elephants became very rambunctious, and they became very aggressive. You talked about the breaking of the family through slavery, and also a lot of black men were impacted by Jim Crow racism. What did you see in Chicago and also maybe in New Orleans now that more or less parrots that sentiment?
The Jim Crow and the racism?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm from the Ninth Ward.
Oh, wow.
Family's from the Ninth Ward. So, so anybody where Katrina, they were showing the most, that impacted me because I cried when I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like you see your home just demolished. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's it. Look, I made me want to tear up now.
Mm-hmm.
It's and to have stories of your family members who say, you know, the helicopters flew over us to get the white people and flew
Mm-hmm.
back.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, that's that part. You got those are the people that they saved, and the people who have that mentality are your teachers, are your doctors, are your police officers, are your this, that, and the third. Now, what Chicago taught me, I grew up in Maywood. So if anybody's watched movies this year, Judas and the Black Messiah, that's the neighborhood.
Right. Okay.
So um, using it as a reference, Fred Hampton his center was on Fifth Avenue after he passed.
Right.
I went to the same high school. The high school's on First Avenue. Now, when you go backwards, like maybe 5 blocks behind the high school, it's a wooded area, and then these just real nice homes.
Right.
You know about gangster culture, like the Italian mafia, Al Capone?
Yes, sir. I heard about it.
Al Capone's right-hand man was Frank White.
Mm-hmm.
Frank White's house was back there.
Mm-hmm.
So to live in an area where you got a notorious gangster and drug dealer in one area, in a 10 block radius, just you can go 10 blocks, literally, from Fifth Avenue to his house. This is the area where it was nice, same police force, if I'm not mistaken, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the guys who bringing all the drugs in the community, you gave him the mayor signed a card to say he has a right to carry a gun.
Mm-hmm.
But now Fred Hampton didn't die on Fifth, but the center's on Fifth.
Mm-hmm.
But that same police force was the same police force that shot him in the head when he was unconscious.
Right.
So that teaches you, you know, oh wow, this is how we you the same people who are fighting crime, but you're protecting a gangster and you're killing an activist. So and people don't realize the remnants of that will be, she was like, as they showed the movie, his lady was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Those cops never had a problem with it. You know, so what I'm getting at is this country never had a problem and continues to not have a problem with making sure we don't have healthy families.
Right. Right. So it sounds like to me you feel that there's a sinister attempt since the breaking of the American family, also the breaking of the black man, a concept which we call buck breaking, to break the mental psyche of the American black man, but also other men of other ethnicities too, to get them to comply to the hideous nature or the nefarious nature of the American courts. I want to more or less go back and more or less process, the mental health aspect of what you're talking about, Brother L.A. And men that experience the loss of their children often encounter in the context of what I would call an adjustment disorder with anxiety, or an adjustment disorder with depression, or a combination of both, or some actually go through states of clinical depression. When you were going through the negative impact of losing your son, let's talk about the stages of grief that you went through as it relates to Kubler-Ross. We know about denial, anger, bargaining, and then acceptance. I believe that's in the order.
Anger, bargaining, guilt. Is it guilt?
No. It's denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. But anyway, depression and then acceptance. It's DABDA. So anyway, denial, anger, bargaining. Depression and then acceptance. But anyway, what the stages that you went through, you vacillated a lot. Which stage did you stay on the most, Brother Joel?
Ironically, I think I was in acceptance the most,
mm-hmm.
because I went through the other 4 before we got to court.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in a situation where we had an agreement, and the agreement was broken. So I was angry about the agreement being broken. I was what you call that? I was bargaining at that particular time, you know. Then denial, I didn't stay in long because it was like, you know, he's like, it's not happening. No, this is happening. So I was at acceptance probably the longest because that's why I was able, when I referenced that first time I was in the court. And the other thing about the acceptance was when I filed for custody, I was here in Texas. They had to change it to the state that she was living in.
Right.
And I'll never forget when I filed, and this is why I was in acceptance a lot. I went to the family court office here, and the lady who does the case was like, "Are you just doing this because you don't want to pay child support?" And my mind was like, "I ought to slap you out of the window right now," you know. And I just looked. I was like, oh, "Okay, all right." And at that particular point, I'm like, "This is what it is. This is exactly what it is," you know, because people don't realize. And I think men have a hard time realizing this. You might, as you say, vacillate. You might keep vacillating because you might go through the 5 stages of grief with the mother, but you also might go through the 5 stages of grief with the attorneys, and you might go through the 5 stages of grief with the court, not the court itself, but the actual court system. Before you get to the court.
Yes, right.
So you wind up doing it multiple times if you're not really paying attention. So for me, it was the acceptance part because I'm like, everybody's like this. Like everybody's on the same page, and I need to get on this page and accept that this is what everybody's on. Right.
So it's almost like he was going through what's called a social labyrinth. You know, for every plateau that you reach, you had to reach another plateau. And see, it goes. That's why I'm so adamant. That's why I started the Manhood Chronicles, because as a clinical therapist, I think a lot of times the plights and the pain of not only men but especially Black men are underrepresented. As a clinical therapist, it's very rare that you see Black men licensed therapists. I'm like a dinosaur, but more or less a 6'5" Black dinosaur that has a masculine presence. You don't really see it that much because a lot of clinical therapists are more or less encapsulated by liberal dogma. But I believe in more or less employing a more fair approach to, more or less dealing with the pains and the issues of a lot of modern men. And that's why I took on this challenge and I took on the Manhood Chronicles, because I wanted men to have what I call a group catharsis, where they're able to share their pain, they're able to share their feelings, they're able to share their frustrations, so they don't take that pain and turn it inward and commit atrocities that can't be more or less accounted for because nobody heard their story. Even me, myself, when I went through some pain years ago, nobody didn't give a damn about me. And it was hard. They didn't care about the years that I sacrificed. They didn't care about the suffering, the pain that I went through. But I was always there for everybody else, but no one was there for me when I went through my pain. And so, Brother L.A.R, I say all of this. I said, who is helping these men process in their pain? Because we can talk about, and I'm not against it, Black girl magic, Black girl rock, and I'm not against it. But how about Black boys rise? And maybe I need to get a shirt called Black Boys Rise. Or Black men stand. How about our pain? Because a community is only as strong as the warriors are in that community. You know about the warrior class because you grew up in Chicago. You grew up in L.A. And so if we're going to have a vibrant nation and a vibrant community of warriors, you must empower the men, because masculine men would not capitulate to the whims of submitting to their women as it relates to authority and power. Masculine Black men stand up and they say what they mean and they mean what they say and they don't back up. So give me your take on that. I didn't mean to get fire and passion. That's the Leo in me.
I love it. Here's my take is a lot of us are broken because we can't afford to fix ourselves. So
I like that.
Therapists.
Right.
You gotta, once you go through these processes, you gotta plan for everything and everything costs. So guys don't take into consideration, okay, if you go into court, you're gonna have to pay for a lawyer. If you lose, you're gonna pay child support. Okay, that's what it is. But now while you're paying child support, now you might have to save up for some therapy.
Right, right, right.
You know, and we don't think about it that far, because what usually happens is a lot of us are slaves to the increase.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of ladies don't, sometimes they don't care, and other times they're just being greedy. Where the guy might work himself to a place where he's paying all his bills and his child support, and he's good. Now he has extra money to save. And the minute they see that, I want some more money.
I want some more money, right?
So now, even though you got yourself in a place of comfort to the point where you can actually think about, maybe I need to go talk to somebody. But once you probably get yourself to that space, you getting papers to go back to court.
Right.
So a lot of us don't plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize how much the financial gain of custody actually takes a lot of time out of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get that time back. But so you wind up seeing a lot of guys that I've seen, you start getting yourself together when your children are grown, when you don't have any fiscal responsibility to them anymore. Then you start seeing people like square up, and you're like, well, you wasn't like that back in the day. Yeah, because there's a lot of pressure on my head,
mm-hmm.
And I couldn't do anything with that. And I would say, before you go on vacation, because that's usually what you do. You do things as a vacation to get away from all of the stress. The money that you save up for vacation, you might want to put that in the therapy first.
Right.
Because it's the worst thing in the world to go out on vacation and dread coming back home.
Right.
You can't enjoy yourself, and you can't do R&R like that.
Right. And it's funny you said that, because therapy in the Black community is often seen as a social enigma. We often see therapy as something negative, which in essence, therapy is actually good. The scriptures say, "Oh, how good is it for the brethren to dwell together in unity." And so barbershops, Brother L.A., was more or less seen in the past as a way for Black men to have what's called a letting experience. In some cultures, it's called blood letting. Mm-hmm. And so they cut the blood. That's part of a catharsis. And so they were allowed to more or less have a letting process. But a lot of times, it's people think therapy is something bad, but iron sharpens iron. And when men come together and we share ideas, that's our healing process. That's why so many of these, counterculture movements and some of these Black male groups have started, because it's men's way to share their pain and to process it unapologetically. What's your take on that?
I think it's twofold. I think just like any other thing, if you can't, you don't like it because you can't afford to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your way of saying, oh, that's some bull.
Mm-hmm.
And which is understandable, because we do that with a lot of things. That's normal. But the other thing is, how can I say this properly? The therapy, I don't think that we think that therapists can understand our experiences in this country, because normally therapists don't look like us.
That's true. Right.
So what we say, they don't realize the things that some of them say that they think will work for us. It will work for somebody who looks like you.
Right.
But it doesn't work the same way like me.
Right.
I remember talking to somebody and having a conversation with them. I was like, if you watch movies and you make the characters in your favorite movies Black, it will destroy the whole movie.
Right.
And it was like, what do you mean? I said, think about Die Hard and Rambo, and if the event, you could James Bond, you couldn't just blow up everything, and you can't walk around in anonymity and do all that stuff because everybody's watching you.
Right.
You can't do that, and they had to kind of scale back, like, yeah, because you can't watch a hero be a hero if they change races, because oh, the police gonna watch them do that, police gonna watch them do that, they gonna stop them doing this. And I don't think when we get therapy, people realize,
right,
you should go do this. I might get arrested doing
right,
that.
right.
You should go here. I might. We have to take some responsibility on. If we need to get better, we might actually have to do some things that are normal for other people that might go bad for us.
Right.
And that's just a gamble that some of us are willing to take and some of us aren't.
You said something that was very powerful, because, I think that's why, a lot of people, even when they see me as a clinical therapist, they're shocked, because you don't see too many, black male therapists. So let me say this: there's a science to the therapeutic process, and there's an art to the delivery of the therapeutic process. The science of therapy is empirically sound. One of the universal treatment models is called cognitive behavioral therapy. But CBT, Brother L.A., actually comes, in my opinion, from the biblical tenets. Whatever a man think, that's what he is. So if I can change my thoughts, I can change my feelings. If I can change my feelings, I can change my behaviors, which is a form of transcendentalism. But there's a delivery to the art and the science of therapy, where a lot of times, white clinicians can empathize with the struggles of a black man, but they can't sympathize with the struggles of a black man because they haven't been through it. Now, see, here's where it's different from me. Not only can I empathize with your pain, I can sympathize because I've been through it myself. Do you see the difference? So that's what makes me different. I can empathize with you, meaning I have a level of a brotherhood, and I feel your pain. But also I can empathize with you because I've been through some of those same strains of aversive policies, aversive racism, and also aversive, what I call microaggressions. I've been through it.
Exactly.
It took me years to become the man that I am. I caught hell riding up this train, because it's a 6'5" masculine black man that speaks truth to power. They don't have a mouse voice. They have a deep, booming voice. They used to call me strident when I was at UNC Chapel Hill. This album, strident. What do you mean by strident? I'm just being myself. Lions roar. But a lot of times, man, you have to diminish yourself to make other people feel comfortable. And no one should have to do that. I believe in being your authentic self. I believe you should be able to be comfortable in your own skin, because everybody else do it. So why can't L.A.R. movement do it, and why can't the coach and clinician do it? And so that was powerful. But therapy is very powerful, just like the church. The church at one point was like a supplement to the therapeutic process. The church and spirituality, because as a therapist, Brother L.A., we look at things through a lens called the bio, which is the physical, psycho, which is the mind, social, the environment, also the spiritual model. We look at all those variants because human beings, Brother L.A., is what I call an integrated being. And also we call it a psychosomatic response, mind over body, body over mind. And so when you're dealing with those different correlations of one another, if you don't know how to process it importantly, a lot of people get caught up in what's called self-medication. They get caught up in other nefarious things that sometimes can be to their detriment. So that's why I decided to take on this journey, to have brothers like you and have other black men, and also men of other ethnicities, because we embrace all men of different backgrounds, but we have a special emphasis on black men because black men are the muse of society. What's your take on that, brother?
We have a different experience. I like clowning with my friends who are non-black. Like, if you call up, as a black man, I could call up all of my friends, or just meet a stranger on the road and say, how old were you the first time the police pulled a gun on you? Like, and there's like, they all give me that look like, what? It's like, we all have that experience. The question isn't if it happened. The question is, how old were you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an extreme for us. They're like, how many times, when you were in school, you raised your hand to answer the questions. Did you ever go to detention because you were smart?
Right.
And it's like, huh? It's like, see, we have a different socializing in this country, which in some ways stagnates us, because it becomes, I don't want to participate. because I've had so many adverse experiences just being, trying to participate in a regular American society that I just don't want any parts of it anymore. And I think we don't, our mind, body, and soul at some point, it takes a toll on us, because mentally it might be the race thing or the father thing. Your body is probably the only thing you normally have control over, because either you're gonna work out or you're gonna eat or drink. So either you're gonna do something good to your body or you're gonna destroy it as an escape.
Right.
And spiritually, I think a lot of us are I think we're more spiritual than religious, but I think a lot of us are not in tune with God like we were when say 30 years ago.
No, I totally agree. And Brother Ron James said, and he's right. I think black men at one point, he said the black church has become an insane asylum for the spiritually destitute. And I'm gonna try to break down what that brother's saying, but I know there was a time when the church was a vibrant part of helping people recover through a lot of their pain. But many black men and men in general see churches as more or less not safe havens for the redistribution to empower the black man and the black community and the black family, but more or less a circus show that more or less appeals to the emotions a lot of times of our women. And one of the biggest things, like Derek Jackson, he was in caught up in a lot of scandals. A lot of black men feel that the black church has not done an adequate job of preaching what's called the Rhema word, or the objective gospel. And because of that, black men no longer see the church as an alternative. It's not because there are not core principles in the Bible that can more or less empower black men. The Bible is the most red-pilled book in the world, in my opinion. If you apply it correctly, it's very powerful, because it talks about hierarchy and order: God, Christ, man, woman, children, and then that is encapsulated in community. But what's your take on that for the disparities that we see in the churches now? And I don't ever see the time when we'll be going back to like we did back in the 40s and the 50s. What's your take on that?
My take is actually, and rest in peace to DMX, what I'm about to say. He carried himself like he was anointed, and you could tell.
Right.
No, minus the flaws, you can tell God was in him. And what I mean by that is, I don't see a lot of people in general in our community anymore that you can just say, yeah, God's in that person. It used to be a plethora of those people.
It did. I agree.
And now it's just like, you don't see that. And I think that has, I think just as much as our leaders getting killed and all of that, I think that our people who had that anointing in them, either they died off or they went and hid. And that changed the dynamics of our community. Because now you're seeing people, we know, like, man, this is BS. Like, religion and spirituality, using Derek Jackson as a reference, comes off like Derek Jackson, insincere. Actually, prior to this, I left the gym, I took a shower, and I was listening to Smokey North for I Need You Now.
Right.
And that's one of the few songs that can actually touch me and bring me to tears.
Wow, right.
And I'm like, we lost it.
Right.
We lost it.
Right. Well, listen, I had Carl Reed from the group called Commission back in the day. You remember the group called the Winans? Marvin Winans, Winans Commission. That music was powerful and anointed, because, when I talked about the biopsychosocial spiritual model, music is an adherent to the spirit of man. And then also, if you listen to Ron Winans' Consecration, check that song out. He talked about being consecrated. That song makes me cry. I had to revoke the man card when I hear Ron Winans talking about being consecrated. That's a powerful song. And those were the things that kept and got black people over in Jim Crow racism and dealing with the owner's impact of segregation in the South. It was those old Negro spirituals, man, that kept us sane and solid. You didn't have what's called depression rates as high as it is now. You didn't have what's called teen suicide because we had community and we had a strong black church that was very vibrant in the past. But you don't have it now because where there's unity, there's strength. And you don't have the strength of unity and the strength of brotherhood and the strength of families and communities anymore, which has more or less lost a lot of children destitute, which in essence, a lot of young kids now turn to other forms of the occult. They're dealing in witchcraft because the church itself has not been efficient in dealing with some of the pains that they're dealing with. What's your take on that?
Yeah, we don't, I don't think generationally we know how to deal with each other's pain. Because I think each generation has had it better than the last, and what bothers you does not bother me. Like I think we can't empathize with each other because if I come from poverty and I got you to the middle class and you was raised in the middle class, your issues ain't my issues. And now you see that, like you see, and in essence, ironically, I think ultimately it's going to be a good thing. Because I think what we're seeing is the things that we used to call soft, some of those things are soft, and some of those things are actually legitimate. And we haven't gotten ourselves to a place of comfort in American society to actually reflect. A lot of times you didn't reflect until you were older. Older people did the reflection for you.
Right.
Certain things to you and had you thinking for days with the simplest of statements. Now, and I think our desire for materialism ruined our connection with God.
Right, I agree.
And it's ruined our generational connections also, because I remember almost cussing out my mother because I went back to my neighborhood and I was riding in the car with her. She locked the doors.
Right.
And my mind was like, if you don't like, because, as a black man, y'all don't realize how many years we've heard a door lock while we're walking by.
Yes, sir. Right. I've experienced it. Right.
And, for me, that's a trigger. Like, don't nobody want nothing from you. Like,
right.
I'm walking down the street and you click. And to see my mother do that in my neighborhood, in the neighborhood that she lived in too.
Right.
Because she separated and went to a better quote unquote neighborhood. It lets me know, like, what happened to the God in you that looks at people with more compassion and love and concern.
Right. I agree with that. Yes, sir. I agree with that. And, Sister Gail Lockett, thank you. She's been a dear heart for more or less leading the crusade on many YouTube platforms for helping push the agenda for encouraging brothers. So shout out to Sister Gail Lockett. She's been an awesome contributor to this cause. And you're correct, Sister Gail. A man is still a man even if he cries. A man that doesn't cry is a dangerous man. And I agree with you 100%. You're 100% correct because, as I said earlier, a broken man is a dangerous man, a hopeless man. And a hopeless man is a dangerous man. And there's a lot of broken kids growing up now. You grew up in the inner cities of Chicago. And we veered off topic a little bit. We're going to get back to your book. But you grew up in the inner city of Chicago. And you saw a lot of that brokenness yourself, Brother L.A. You saw it. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was the west side. That ain't the inner city. So somebody said that where you from ain't the inner city. It's the west side.
It's the west side, right.
I'm going to just correct it because I know somebody from Chicago. They're like, no, that wasn't that. But
right.
A lot of the brokenness came from stress because nobody wanted to live there.
Right.
And the stress came from not knowing how to get from point A to point B.
Right.
I think our parents and grandparents, some of them did the best they could, and some of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people who didn't, and what I mean by they didn't, they knew how to get us from point A to point B, but they didn't want to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
So we found out on our own.
Mm-hmm.
I think that stress in itself, in the constant putting the pressure on the children to get us out of the poverty or get us out of the hood, I think that in itself created a powder keg that left a lot of broken kids.
Right.
You know, we felt like failures if we didn't get our parents and grandparents out of a situation they could have got themselves out of.
Right.
So that's a hard pill to swallow a lot of times.
Listen, the word sublimation means taking something negative and use it in a positive way to cope. You came up with the acronym, and I always meant to ask you. I was trying to figure out what it stood for, but L.A.R. movement. And before you answer that, one of the things I would do as a form of sublimation, because sublimation is a healthy ego defense mechanism. I remember the song called "Soul to Soul" back in the 90s called "Keep on Moving, Don't Stop." That kept me grounded, man. That kept me motivated. That was my sublimation of taking something negative and turning it into something positive. What does the acronym L.A.R. movement means? And how did that sublimation help you become the man that you are now?
Okay, L.A.R. I was in a rap group.
Okay.
So I was a rapper. My friend was the producer.
Mm-hmm. Go spit some bars for the crowd real quick.
No, we're not doing that today. but initially, the YouTube page was going to be specific. Was going to be for the music.
Mm-hmm.
But I also was like, you know what? If I want to talk about something, I want to talk about something. So we was going to do it like that, but he didn't want to get on the camera.
Mm-hmm.
But so I brought that up to say the type of music L.A.R. came from was Lorraine's Audubon Revival.
Say it again.
Lorraine's Audubon Revival.
Oh, I like that. What does that mean?
Lorraine's is where Martin Luther King died.
Mm-hmm.
Audubon is where Malcolm got killed.
Oh, wow.
And revival is to bring it back. Bring that type.
Wow.
Bring
that's
that
powerful.
type. Yeah. So that's what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I just kept the name because, whether it was music or just talking, I think we need to actually bring back the love for each other to want the best for each other.
No doubt.
So, that's the whole premise.
Okay, great. What type of negative coping when you was going through this catharsis, brother L.A., that you were tempted to do, but you didn't do it? Because a lot of times people self-medicate by maybe smoking weed, drinking alcohol, sleeping with multiple women. How did you keep yourself motivated by using positive coping skills versus negative? And I want you to share this, especially with our young men in the audience, because they need it. Well, probably need it just as much as the older men. But I want you to share specifically of how you coped with the negative ravages of being a non-custodial parent. How did you cope? How did you cope when you were going through that transition?
All of this stuff put together, because that's partially where the music came from, because I needed an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one outlet. YouTube was another outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Fitness was another outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Cooking was another outlet. Gardening was another outlet. Started buying guns. I don't shoot as much because bullets are expensive now.
Right.
So shooting was another outlet. Boxing, another outlet. And just learning new things and going to new places and having new experiences was another outlet. And ultimately, I was curious. I was using those hobbies as a way to get myself out of that funk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those hobbies became a lifestyle that kept me out of that funk.
Mm-hmm.
And they also became a way to teach my son how to do things, when I would be when he was interested.
Right.
Or when he needed to know something. So for me, I didn't go that far negative because I started channeling that anger early.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of times people don't have a outlet, and that's what leads to the vices.
Right.
And I would say, and I know you know about this in this psychology profession, where they tell you if you can't get a pet, one of the best things you can get is a plant.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because the way you treat that plant and you water that plant, you talk to that plant. If you give a plant love, it grows better.
Right. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So you can tell where you are as a person by if you have plants, how you take care of them. Because if you don't give them enough love, they die. And you realize if you can't do that with a pet, you could do that with a plant.
Right.
Plants die, you start realizing I am not as present as I thought it was.
Right. Right.
So for me, those were and still are my outlets.
And those are all awesome options. Actually, when I taught school, I was going to use plant behavior modification to reward boys for good behavior. So more or less, how you took care of that plant was a sign of your motivation for reward, because it's part of social contracting. It's more or less meeting the mandates of that social contract by more or less living up to the expectations. And so, and I know the boys love a challenge. Men, by inherently, we do our best when we're challenged to be great. When you think about, you and I grew up at the time when they had Tecmo Bowl and Madden and NFL 2K5, and when Madden took the contract, they weren't motivated anymore and they pull up crappy products. But let's go back more or less talking about the lessons from a non-custodial parent. And I think I asked you this question earlier. What is the social implications of the non-custodial parent? And maybe you answered that. I asked you so many questions. Oh. And how does it impact, and how does it emasculate Black men or any man, in your opinion?
The social implications, actually, that's what we're going through right now. Because part of this is also the backdrop for go to school, get a job so you don't need no man.
Right.
Or, you can have a kid. We went through that season where you are the mother and the father, or you're happy Father's Day mom.
Right.
And not realizing that we raised a generation to be alone but have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or to have kids but be alone. So now you're seeing the breakdown of not just how that single parent family doesn't work, but you're seeing how that breakdown mentally breaks down the custodial parent as the non-custodial. And the irony of it is this: we don't have a family support system like we did back in the day. So
right.
On their own. I was one of the people I was in a group that were raised by grandparents. People don't have, and from what I see, people don't have grandparents like we did. Grandparents are not raising people's kids and the family is taking care of the kids like that, or the kids are coming together and having a sleepover with all the cousins and all that. That doesn't happen much anymore.
Right, I agree.
So you're creating a society of loners who in some ways are yearning, who don't even understand how a nuclear and extended family benefit them. And they are not willing to make sacrifices to have or keep one. And unfortunately, what also adds to the equation is the cost of living has increased so high, you really can't afford to be alone, but you were groomed to be alone.
Right.
So society, to me, is is fiscally going downhill and mentally going downhill at the same time. They might be related now at this particular point.
No, yeah, I totally agree, man. When you have to break down, I always tell people the epigenesis to a vibrant society and a vibrant culture is having an intact family. Of having strong fathers, nurturing, loving mothers, and men and women working together as a team to carry on the legacy to the next generation. Eric Erickson talked about, the stage that you and I are in right now, Brother L.A., is called generality versus stagnation. And generality basically means, I'm going to give, I'm generating income, I'm generating legacy coupons. I call it legacy coupons to push the other generation forward. But the last stage is called ego integrity versus despair. And this more or less parrots to what Kevin Samuels talked about a little bit. I'm going to do a show on that at some point. Ego integrity is similar to what the Apostle Paul said, I kept the faith, and now which is laid upon me is a crown of life. But despair is when you're on that deathbed and when you're about to cross over into the next dimension, whether it's with God or unfortunately with the devil or hell. And you're looking over your life and you're saying to yourself, did I live my life on purpose? And therefore you start going to what's called an existentialist crisis because you haven't lived your life on purpose. And that more or less parrots, similar to something that Kevin Samuels has said, that many will die alone. Because they will die alone because they've been hoodwinked by aversive liberal policies that more or less does not inspire unity. I always tell people over and over again that black men and black women were muse of a common cause. We were muse together. We were struggling together. But now this fragmentation where you had, what's the name of it? I can't think of the company. But they gave Goldman Sachs gave like $10 billion to our women instead of giving it to the black family and the black community. So many are going to realize, Brother L.A., when they get on their deathbed, that those degrees really don't mean nothing. Many are going to realize when they are looking back in time that they're going to wish they would have made better decisions. And because at the end of the day, the only thing you got is your family. That's all you got. Can you imagine on your deathbed, man, your son or daughters being there to help you transition into the other world, into the glory world?
You just made me realize something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep it basic. Basic psychology, the ego, id, and the superego.
Yes, sir. Right.
I think because of how society is, children and adults, probably, adults and children of these generations right now, you're either missing your id or your superego because because of the lack of parenting, the duality of mother and father.
Right.
Because you see people who are super delusional in a sense of their super ego sees them as more of a deity than a person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you see people with a real id that they have a real rebellious personality.
Right.
And there's not the balance of the ego in the middle to balance out the duality of that. Mm-hmm. It's just an id and the ego talking or a super ego and the ego talking.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's gonna cause a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you can reach self-actualization without the duality of id and superego.
Right. That's very interesting, and also I'm very philosophical, and that brings a lot of light to what you're saying. Is there one chapter in your book, Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father, that you would like to share with the audience as we're getting down to closing this last chapter of what Brother L.A.R. movement? Are the American court systems unfair to American fathers? So, as we get closer to the end of this poignant show that I've really enjoyed, which I could talk to you for hours, man. What would you like to share from your book that can be beneficial to the young men and men in general?
Well, I will say I predicted in my book that because of the non-custodial, the prevalence of it, mm-hmm. It was going to change society in a way that even the courts were going to have to readjust what they've been doing. Mm-hmm. Because one of the simplest thing about the court system is nine times out of 10 women win. Mm-hmm. But what's problematic about that is they don't win because they're women, really. They win because men are considered the breadwinners and the court needs the money.
Right.
So when you go into the court, you got to realize the court wants who they can get the most money from.
Right.
Now, On top of that, people are not taking into consideration that, and I said it in the book, the family court and the criminal court in every city are not that far apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you, the children are talking about in family court, a lot of them wind up in criminal court a decade later.
Mm-hmm.
I had an ex-girlfriend who was a lawyer. She's real good people. And I had and she was trying to get this young man, his kid, juvenile, so he didn't get he didn't go to juvie, juvenile prison or whatever. And she was like, I just want, if I could get his family to send him to his father, I think this is in this. And I was like, listen, you got to see if that family is going to act like their dad actually exists when they get into that criminal court.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought she didn't understand me because this part of the book also where, like, I have friends I have a few friends who were in law, and she had to walk up on a conversation of hearing them reprimand this boy to tell him, don't tell this court that you know your daddy, because if you tell him, they're gonna send him to you. They're gonna send you to him.
Wow.
And she walked up on the conversation, and it really shook her as a woman. Because she was like, this is what we doing. It started opening her eyes to a lot of things she was seeing in her cases and why they would pan out the way they would. And the effect that has on society is America can't afford to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it ruined the intelligence of the country.
Right.
Which is ruining the ingenuity and innovation of the country, which is ruining the money of the country, which is, we don't think there's anybody to get this who has any future ideas to get this country out of the $20 trillion debt it's in.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, this is America's capitalism. It's about money. It's going to change. And all those quote unquote school shootings that were predominantly kids of who were in single mother households, that brought a whole nother dynamic into it. Like, maybe we need the fathers, because the schools are and were still against them. If the dad comes and visit, the school could be like, no, because the mother said no.
Mm-hmm.
So it caused the environments that are even in the school system.
Mm-hmm. So
society can't maintain it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The back end profit isn't even worth it.
Now, Brother L.A., we jumped around a little bit, and I want you to share this with the audience real quick because we're about to wrap up. And once again, man, we will do this again. I love your passion and your conviction, and you're a fire sign like me, so we're gonna always bring that heat. But what would you, from a man perspective, want to share with the women that are listening? What do Black men need to feel appreciated, and what must women of ADOS become in order to bring back the vibrancy of the past, from your opinion? Then we're gonna wrap it up.
Okay. I actually talked to this with my lady a few days ago. I made a video about it.
Mm-hmm.
What Black women need to do is give Black men their flowers while they're living.
Oh, I love that. Say it for the ones in the back so they can't hear you.
What Black women need to do is give Black men their flowers while they're living. Mm-hmm. The feminism, the ideologies, and somewhat the selfishness to expect as a woman you always going to get your flowers if a man is in the room. Mm-hmm. Do not reciprocate giving these guys their flowers. Mm-hmm. And this leads to part of our disconnect, because guys don't think they're going to get any type of, we don't expect to get love, loyalty, companionship, or giving from the opposite sex in our group. We expect to be loved or cared about after the relationship ends or we're dead. So I think that would be the gist of it.
Okay, great. Brother L.A.R. movement, still moving. Check out his YouTube page. This brother, like I said, is the Duke of YouTube as it relates to male empowerment. And also, please click like, subscribe, and share to Brother L.A.R. movement. But also, this channel, The Kosher Clinician, is new. So please like, share, and subscribe my channel as well, because as a clinical therapist, we need to get the message out. And I feel like as a Black man or clinician of color, I am that balm of Gilead that can help more or less some of our men deal with the ravages of the pain that they're experiencing. Brother L.A., as we're about to wrap up, what did you get out of this show? How was it beneficial to your psyche, besides you and not being Fire Signs and Tar Heel fans? And what will you take to the brothers of your page? What will you take to the young men from your page from having an interview with the culture clinician? What did you take from this beautiful occasion?
What I got from the show was very thoughtful and insightful conversation that makes that's gonna make me think after we're done. You know, I think what I hope people take from it is that our dysfunction and our being separated can be fixed. You know, it's not impossible. It's not even improbable. And I hope that, you know, people understand the importance of balance. You know, because I think if we're not balanced, the imbalance that we're creating is what creates the hopelessness.
Right. I totally agree with that. You know, if we look at it from the lens of theology, as we're about to sign off, you know, the great teacher and the prophet Jesus said, who I call the Messiah, the Son of God, said that I have glorified the Father, and the Father has glorified me. And there's beauty in the power of unison between the black man, the black woman, or just men and women in general. Families are faltering and communities are faltering as we have this conversation. And there needs to be a discussion, but also some self-worth or more or less introspection on the behalf of some of our women. If a woman wants to be protected, loved, and more or less honored by her man, she must more or less ask herself the question, what can I do or what must I do to come back to the table to more or less inspire hope? So, Brother L.A., it's been a pleasure talking with you. To the guys, the men and the women, shout out to Sister Gail Lockett. You are awesome. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support the program, please give to the cause. Cash out 7 Smalls. You know, as a clinical therapist, this stuff is time consuming, man. You know, I'm about to see a client now. I have to get off with LA. But show your love by, you know, send me a little small donation. $7 Smalls. I'm very grateful for any donation that you guys give as I work to bring forth quality content that will not only empower myself, but also empower men and women, but more or less the brotherhood. So, Brother L.A., we're about to sign off, man. It's been a pleasure. We must do this again. You know, I never in a million years thought I'd get in contact with the Duke of the Manosphere, you know, because I've been listening to you for years, and I had a pointed discussion with Brother O'Shea Duke Jackson. You know, he's a fire sign too. He's an Aries, by the way, so it makes sense. Leo, Aries, Sagittarius.
I thought I was easy to find.
What do you mean by that?
I thought I was easy to find. I'm like, I keep it. I'm chill. So because O'Shea is very reachable, so I thought I was reachable too.
Right. Well, I'm glad I was able to get. Well, you know, when I say get in contact, you know, I just been, you know, doing different things, man. You know, and it was in my mind, so I need to reach out to Brother L.A. because I listen to you as much as I listen to him. So, but anyway, it's about 4 minutes after the hour of 4 o'clock. We're about to sign off, and once again, show your love by supporting the cause. Cash out at the Cash App $7 Smalls, and you know, Brother L.A., anything you want to say before we get off this timely platform?
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
No doubt, man. Much love. All right, so we're about to sign off. Give me a minute, Brother L.A. Hold tight. We're about to sign off. L.A., we're gonna talk in the background in a minute. And much again, thank you, Sister Gail Lockett. You are awesome. So all for the brotherhood. We're signing off. Enjoy. Your fate is before you. Choose wisely.